So, Matt, why did you write this piece? And also, more importantly, when did you write it? Because I texted you last week and you said you were sick all week, you were stuck in bed, you couldn't even get out of bed. I told you, I said immunity broth would be the solution. I don't even know if you got it. But when did you write this essay that has gone completely viral over Twitter?
Yeah, so it actually started on Thursday night, and I continued it through the weekend. The reason actually was I was home with my family, and I was trying to find the words to explain what was going on to my parents because, frankly, I do feel like we have hit an inflection point. I was struggling, and I started looking online for things I could send them, so it wasn't their son talking to them, but like folks that they might know or folks in the industry that they can look at and say, this isn't just my son talking to me. And frankly, I came up empty. I was immediately drawn to Dario Amode's essays, but while they're utterly fantastic and like probably the best things written in the industry on this stuff, they're not meant for the average person who isn't in tech. And I realized that I needed to find a way to explain this to them that they would understand without having to learn all the jargon, because people shouldn't be forced to learn all the jargon to know what's going on. They shouldn't be forced to understand the dynamics of training, for example.
Mm,
So my idea here was really just, can I put something together that my mom would understand, that my dad would understand, that takes the ideas from a lot of these pieces that are utterly fantastic and use some of my own thinking and my own ideas and how I think this is going to move forward and what I think people should do and how they should prepare, and then explain it in a way that just makes sense, that isn't forcing them to sort of understand extreme levels of jargon and similar things.
right.
Yeah.
So we're going to get into the different elements you talked about here, but if you were to just summarize the entire essay in a single sentence, what would be the message you would be trying to send here?
Yeah, it's tough because there's a lot there, but I
Right,
think it's going to impact everyone differently
right,
and different timelines and sort of in different amounts.
right,
But people should stop and think at a minimum.
right.
This might affect me. Let's just take it seriously for a second. If it does, what will it look like? What does it look like if all this hype around AI not working actually isn't true? Just in case it isn't. What should I be doing? What will my life look like in 3 years if I do nothing? What will it look like in 3 years if I decide to do something? I just want to get people to think, because all of the content right now is for the in group. And that's not a good thing. It means that the folks that aren't in the sort of know in AI already aren't hearing this message. And I just wanted to spread the message, right? It was originally written for my parents, but I realized this could probably help a lot of other people. I didn't expect people to take it as well as they have. I frankly thought it was still a little bit too technical. Clearly, it's kind of broken out and gone way further than I expected. But the message is just take a second and think. This may not affect you. This may affect you. Just in case it does, what should you do?
Why do you think that we are in the middle of another inflection point? You pointed to OpenAI's GPT 5.3 Codex and Anthropic's Opus 4.6 as two pivotal releases that changed the game in a way that even people who say, "Well, I've tried AI before; it wasn't that good," in your mind makes that argument obsolete. Why did these two releases change the game for you?
Yeah, it's in particular mostly 5.3 Codex. I've been extremely impressed by that model, and I had early access to it to test it. And it was hard not to talk about it because it was the first time I felt like, and I write about these models every time they come out. I often am very impressed because they're always better than the last versions, or usually better than the last versions. But I'm still kind of like working with the AI and iterating with it and finding issues. 5.3 Codex felt like the first time I could just be like, okay, here is the thing I want you to do. Here are the tools I'm going to give you access to do it. Do it. And I will literally come back hours later and it's just it's perfect. And it's a little terrifying for me. And I think I don't want to sort of like amp up people and get them feeling sort of negative, but I think it's important to know that this stuff is coming. And the way that I think about it, right? AI models are kind of like a year ahead in coding of everything else. Where it is in coding today is where sort of everything else will be a year from now. And if we're seeing this today with code, right, we expect that about a year from now, or possibly even sooner at this rate of progress, this is going to translate to everything else. It was just such an eye-opening moment to see that model go from sort of just simple prompt to this thing just works without me in the loop at all. It just tests everything on its own if you give the right tools, and it just builds incredible software. And I think that same thing is going to happen for most other industries over the next year or so. That being said, it's going to take longer to actually sort of proliferate through the economy. Just because there's a capability doesn't mean it's actually going to sort of be made real in terms of like enterprise adoption immediately, but it's in terms of capability, it's going to be there.
But you made the argument that AI, for this reason, what we're seeing with Codex, with 5.3 and with Opus 4.6, you made the argument that this is different from other previous waves of automation. Why is that the case?
It's a little hard to put into words. A lot of this is, but the way that I think about it is previous waves of automation sort of were like productivity boosts, and early versions of AI. I mean, I would say up until like a couple versions ago, pretty much productivity boosts. Though they've been increasingly moving towards the sort of end of the spectrum that I've been talking about. Now we're getting to models that can do what a human can do on a computer. And it's not 100% there yet, but it's getting there, right? If you were displaced in a previous wave of automation, right, you can move and do something else on a computer, right? There's so many opportunities for that. But when an AI can do anything a human can do on a computer, and I think that's coming, it's a very different question. It's what can we do that an AI can't do? And the answers are slimming down each time there's a new release, if that makes sense.
Okay, so what can we do then? The essay paints a bit of a stark picture on what people will do for work, and
Yeah.
so and I think I know you to be a pretty optimistic person. So what can people do then in this environment?
I think it's different for everyone. And again, the idea of this article was to just get people thinking. I don't think there's a single silver bullet. I don't think there's a single panacea. Like it's just you need to think about what it means for you and your job. And I think people can't go into it blindly. They can't say, oh, this isn't going to do what I do. They have to think of the sort of sense of like, this will. So what should I do? And if it doesn't, great. But just in case, they should be thinking about it. Right. So in terms of what people should do, I would say just take your time to think about this and then say, okay, if this world is what this sort of like article paints, what should I be doing 3 years from now that can differentiate me? Should I be owning more? Should I be trying to start a company so that, I can benefit from this more than if, somebody else owns it, I'm working for them? Should I be thinking about building a social media following so that I can distribute things that I build? Right. There's a million different answers. And I think the question sort of like can go in a million different ways for a million different people.
Right.
That's why it's really hard to answer
But
because
you made the point. You said people need to learn how to be using these
yeah.
tools even more than they already are. And
Mhm.
one thing I thought was interesting was you talked about education, and I don't think you were trying to say this should be a substitute for education, but I think the point you were
Sure.
trying to make was that really, I mean, kids need to learn how to integrate these things into their everyday lives so that we don't fall off in terms of skill sets.
Yeah. And again, no one knows what's happening. And I think that's part of the point and part of the problem. Like it's easy to articulate where we are today and where it's going to go over the next, couple years. But it's way harder to say this is what the world's going to look like in 5 years because it's just changing so fast and you can't see through the fog, as a lot of the leaders in the space like to say. In terms of education, right, I think it's still very hard to know what the right thing to do is, but then you can only guess. And if I had to guess today, I'd say kids should be learning to be extremely adaptable, learning how to use these tools to make what they want to come true. And I think until we have more clarity on what this world is actually going to look like for real, not just in hypotheticals, it's hard to make really concrete decisions, right? But I think you can start thinking about it today as like take current education and start kind of optimizing it more around like what is going to be possible, right? If a child is learning without a calculator, right, they're sort of teaching themselves for a world that's not the real world. It's an old world. And I think
Right.
the world is going to be this is going to be everywhere. You need to learn to use it, to work with it. And again, you may not need it. It may not become this big thing that we all expect it to become, but you want to be prepared in case it does.
And last question for you before you let you go. You had something like 15,000 people reposting this article. What was the funniest response, the funniest message that you got from folks?
It's funny. I don't actually think there was anything too crazy with this one. Normally, when I post something and it goes relatively viral, and this is a whole other level, and I did not expect
Right.
that, I get a range of things, like from congratulations to death threats and everything in between. This has been more of a consistent wow. I didn't realize this was happening, or wow, I need to share this with the people in my life, which I think is a good thing, right? The whole idea of this was not to scare people; it was just to help them understand this is real. And I actually think that it hit the mark there, which I'm very, very happy with because even
Well,
if
and
it
I think you very much put into words, I think, a lot of the uncertainty that people
yeah.
are feeling in this moment. We obviously had OpenClaw and Moltbook as well, which I think made this moment even more heightened. But we'll
Mhm.
have to talk about that another time. Matt, I want to thank you so much for coming on. That is Matt Shumer, a GP at Shumer Capital here on TITV.